Welcome to the Franchise Masters podcast, where aspiring entrepreneurs learn what it takes to find, buy, and build successful franchise businesses. My name is Drew Carpenito, and I'm your host as we dive into these fascinating behind-the-scenes stories of people who have used surprising franchises to create massive success. I'm glad you're here. Let's dig in. Welcome to the Franchise Masters podcast. I am joined by a fellow Philadelphian who is reeling in success after a big weekend of the Phillies playoff win and run to the National Championship Series and the Birds waxing the Cowboys last night. Brian Beers, welcome, my friend.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We're not here to talk about Philly sports. We're here to talk about your success and your journey as a franchise owner. But would love to just kick it off to hear your story and your journey, because you're doing some interesting things that I think you have a very unique strategy that has worked well for you that we're going to dive into. But would love to hear a little bit more about you and how you got into franchising and what you're up to.
Yeah, sure. So I'm almost 35 years old. Yeah, live in the suburbs of Philly. My family has been in the franchising business, my dad, since 1976. He got started because in Midas, and the brand we were in today, because his uncle was in Midas in like the 60s up in Boston. He got into it. He was having a ton of success. I think, I don't know, at 8, 9 locations, like he owned a bunch of the market, making a boatload of money. And my dad was 22 years old, and my grandfather, so his dad, had recently retired from being a teacher, and they said, we're looking for something to do. And so they went in business together to open up. It wasn't the first location in Philly, but it was in Midas, but it was up there in there might've been less than 10 stores. And so my dad, grew the business, had success. His brother-in-law joined the business, my uncle, and together, over 3 or 4 decades, they bought locations, they sold locations, they opened up from scratch, they turned them around. And so I went to college. I joined the business in 2010 after I graduated. And at the time, my dad had been in it for 70 or 30 something years, and was getting kind of tired of it. And 08, 09 had been, rough. And if I didn't join, they would have sold. And so, okay. I joined, breathe new life into the business, start just learning, connecting with other franchisees, just figuring it all out. Probably start taking over the company in 2016, 2015, about 5 years in it to kind of get that point. And then separately started buying additional locations. And my brother had joined kind of right around this point. And so together, year by year, we bought 2 locations in 2016, and then in 2017, we bought another one. 2018, we did another 2. 2019, we did another one. Over the last 18 months, we've bought 18 locations now. So we're up to 30.
Wow.
As of today, we do about $36 million, all Midas, all auto repair, all, Philly, North Jersey, Allentown is kind of our territory, unofficial territory. And so yeah, that's where I'm at today.
Congratulations, man. That's an operation. Yeah. So you bought 18, you had 18 acquisitions in the past 18 months?
Something like that. Yeah. So the story goes, we had 12, and then in I don't know, it was the end of 2020, we had 12. And we decided, what do we want to do? I called up, we said, hey, let's try to get this one location. And it was in Trenton area of New Jersey, which is kind of the Philly market. And I talked to this guy who's got 7, and he had that one, and then he had 6 more north of that in Jersey. And he says, how about instead of buying the one, you buy all my locations? And I went out. And so, that's it. We went down that path, and we said, okay. And so we bought those 7 in June of 2021. And then once we were in the market now in Jersey, then there's a whole bunch of these single stores and smaller groups that, prior to this, I wouldn't be interested. But once we're in the market, right, we already have the overhead committed. We have district managers, we've got payroll, all this stuff. It's easier then to grow within it. And so then, we bought another one in Jersey in December, and then we bought another 3 in February. So that got us up to 11 in Jersey. And then in this past June, a couple months ago, we bought the Allentown market out, which was 5 locations. And then we opened up another two. So yeah, that got us to 18.
Dude, that's
So
awesome, man.
yeah, it's been a lot of, so we went from 12 locations to 30 basically from May of 21 till June of 22. And so yeah, what gets you where you're at today doesn't kind of get you to the next level, and that's what we're currently figuring out. Is like as your company grows, and you can read all the books you want, but like learn knowledge, is a lot different than book knowledge.
For sure.
If you know what I mean. So yeah.
All right, so that we got a lot to unpack there because that how cool, like family business that you guys took over, and you and your brother have kind of been able to scale it to a new level. I'm curious, like, so when you made the jump from, was it 12
Yep.
to 30?
Yep.
And I guess the initial jump was from 12 to like the 19.
Yeah, 12 to 19, and then a couple months later it was 20, and then 24, and then 29, and then yep.
So you took like the big jump from 12 to the 6 or 7 that you bought first. Did what type of change did you have to go through? Was it like a massive organizational change, or were you able to fold them in pretty quickly, pretty easily?
Yeah, so a couple things. I mean, the first thing is like it's a mindset thing where we had believed for so long that our success was because we were hands-on and like in the stores every day, right? And I'd see these much larger organizations who are spread across the country. We look at like average volumes per location, right? That's how you can kind of rank yourself and compare others. And we were always pretty proud that we have one of the highest average volume, per location compared to some of these guys who have a lot of stores who do much lower on a per store basis. And so we had this thing that, like if we get too big, like we're not going to be able to, have the consistency. And then like, I don't know, it's like an ego thing, I guess, of being proud of everything. And so, we had to kind of break that mindset to say, hey, instead of like that, we can do it. Like it is possible. We just got to figure it out. And so that was the first thing is belief in ourselves that we could, expand. I mean, we're talking an hour and a half away. It's not like it's like California, and have success. And that's what we saw. And then structurally, I mean, yeah, we had to like hire some more people. We hired another district manager. We built out the team, but like the beauty of being in a franchise is like a lot of it's the same. Like a lot of it's plug and play. Like even these 5 new locations in now the third market, I mean, for the frontline guys, like who are in the stores every day, like actually doing all the work and making it happen, like nothing of their life really changes. Like, so it's easy, right? For day one, like they find out, Monday morning, and like Tuesday, it's all the same thing, right?
Yeah.
And that's what makes it easy, I think, to scale and grow within a franchise is that it's plug and play versus if I was buying 5 different like independent shops, like, and I have to tell them, well, we're not going to do transmission work anymore. And like, you're going to start using these forms and, we're going to change your hours and you need to work on Saturdays now. We have this new point of sale. And like, if I bought 5 different shops, I'd probably have 5 different point of sales to train through and comp plans. And like, but when you're in a franchise system, generally, I mean, we all the same point of sale. We all use the same forms. We follow the same core process. Now we have things that makes us unique and better performers, but like, that's not like day one changes. It's like culture things and just, how we think and, commitment to consistent execution and these other factors, which kind of happen over time. And so I think that's what's most exciting to me. And when I talk about on like Twitter and the podcast and stuff is like, franchises in a way are easy to roll up because of the plug and play nature that they have. And that's why you see these companies like the Flynn Group or whoever have like 4,000 locations and they can buy 100 at a time. Like it'd be almost impossible to do that in other things that don't have like the systems in place already.
Right. Yeah. The biggest thing that changes for the employees is just who signs their paycheck, right?
Yeah, exactly. And, day one, at least. And then we have our ways of doing things, right? That are slightly different and better. And in a lot of cases, modern, because we're buying them from, guys who want to retire and they've been thinking about selling for months and then they're not investing into the stores and they're not like up on the latest things, right? Because they're kind of out, 1 foot out the door. And so over time, there's changes, but like day one, it makes for a much easier transition to build trust and kind of get it going.
So what was it that changed for you guys to want to grow the business the way that you've been growing it from that first acquisition deal?
Yeah, I mean, it's we want to win, right? Like I'm competitive, so like you get these opportunities and it's like, hey, why not me? Like, why can't I do it? And like, I see these other guys doing it and having success, in our brand and in other brands. And it's an internal drive to win is a big part of it. And then, then it's the scale thing. Like I can hire better and better people. And then their payroll costs, the cost, to run the business then gets diluted, right? Every location we can add, that overhead gets diluted by one more. And so, this has allowed us to hire, we have 5 district managers, we have 30 stores, about 5 district managers. Each district manager oversees about 6 locations. Each one of those district managers used to report to my brother and I, but now we've hired a COO. So they all report to the COO who reports to me. And like, being able to make those investments of these multiple layers of payroll can only happen if you've got the sales and the cash flow to support it.
Right.
And so like, for me, it's been a systematic thing of replacing myself from daily operational roles, whether when we had 6 locations and all 6 stores reported to me, like I was the district manager, then it was like, all right, if I ever like don't want to handle 100 phone calls a day, I need to hire somebody, but to hire somebody and pay them whatever, $80,000 without me taking like a big pay cut personally, I need to like buy a couple more locations, right, to justify the payroll. And then you just keep kind of that, it's like a stair step approach where, to continue to invest in the overhead, you need to add locations, and then you hit a limit, like a max of what you can handle. And it's an inflection point to decide, hey, are we good where we're at? Or we're going to make the investment in the overhead, in the support, in the leadership. But if we do, now we have the capacity to take on another X amount of, locations and volume. And then you just continue until you reach a point that, you're comfortable and you have enough. And then, then you can work on the other aspects, which are like, how do we increase sales? How do we increase our margin? How do we squeeze another couple points out of it? Right. Once you kind of have the infrastructure built.
So it's not just a matter of growing from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. Like you have to grow in chunks at some point too, to be able to have the enough revenue and enough cash flow coming in to be able to justify
at least
the organizational structure.
In our business, and at least, I mean, it depends on it, but for us, it's like a 5 to 7 number. Like one leadership district manager person can directly oversee. It's like the old thing, like how many people can one person manage? It's like 5 to 7, right? Optimally. And so it's kind of in that realm. Now it obviously depends the type of business. If you're a territory based business, it's gonna be different than, I'm in a retail like brick and mortar business. But I think that's the big thing is you got to know like what is the capacity, and then you build to that capacity, and then you just decide, hey, I'm going to invest in, because sometimes you got to invest in the better person before you can go and actually get the sales, like get the additional locations. So you got to be able to weather the storm a little bit on the cash flow. But as long as you're moving towards that bigger goal, now if you stop and you don't get those acquisitions, then you really got to grow your same store business, right, to justify it. So part of it's kind of having that strategy laid out of, all right, what am I going to do? What's the business going to look like in a year from now or 2 years from now? Like even these are short-term things. I'm not saying 5 years, like these are short-term to try to start to kind of give you some direction on it.
Yeah. Well, you're very formulaic about it in a bracketing kind of way, like the big, the 20% that drives 80% of it, right? You kind of understand the levers, and I know it took some time to figure all that stuff out. So when you were in school, was this the plan all along for you to join the family business?
I've always been entrepreneurial. I've always had jobs. I worked in music school. I was really into like doing software web development. So I did like database driven software development in high school. And then even in college, I had a job on South Beach for a couple of years working with this guy doing iPhone apps. And so I always like have been numbers and like some of that stuff, like comes naturally. That's kind of how I think. And so I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't want to be like I wasn't like that good, like to be like a developer, but I wanted something that was entrepreneurial, and I wanted something that I thought was, I wanted to go back to the Philadelphia area. I didn't really want to go to, I looked at I considered like finance, like, I don't know, whatever, investment banking kind of side of it. Cause I'm very good with the numbers, but I didn't want to go to New York. And so anyway, I decided to go back home, and, I saw there was a good opportunity, and I figured, hey, I could come and kind of this old, boring business, and I could bring some of the technology, some of the reporting, all this like software kind of things I was working on, to do. And that's kind of what we've done too.
Nice. So down in South Beach, are you a hurricane?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I watched your Hurricanes wax my Hokies on Saturday in person with my
Oh, there you
daughter and
go.
my father.
There
Beautiful
you
day.
go.
Even though you guys had 17 penalties, we still couldn't beat you. But no, it's cool. So you kind of brought some outside. You had some perspective from outside the automotive industry that you thought could benefit the business, and which
Yep.
versus kind of growing up in the industry, and sometimes it's hard to have those outside perspectives. So as it relates to like how you are building your team and your organization, do you have a strong lean in terms of like, do you like hiring people from within the industry for like your leadership side of things, or do you look outside the industry to be able to
Yeah.
bring
So
somebody
both,
in
I
and train
mean,
them?
both. Like the COO we just hired came from 20 years in the military. He was chief of staff, special ops, like super organized, intelligent guy. And he, within a couple, I mean, he's been now, I don't know, 3 months in, and he's already like picked up 90% of the job, right? Because he's like a smart and organized guy. Like, so a lot of it at the leadership level isn't about fixing cars, like, because that's not our role. Our role is like managing people. And so you need people who are good at managing people. Like, and even our district manager role, like in that one, it's the key success is being able to identify and hire talented people. Like that is because if they can hire a good store manager, like they don't have to do, not that they don't do much, but like it kind of, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy versus if they hire a bad person who then needs a lot of attention and they have to micromanage them and there's always problems and then they have turnover at the store because they don't know how to manage their people. They create a lot more work for themselves versus like a really good manager has low turnover, low customer complaints, good sales. Like, so, and a lot of times it's, I always say we're in the people business. We just happen to fix cars. And so, and I think that applies to almost every business. And so it's hiring people who are good at managing other people is by far the number one skill set. And they can learn everything else. Like I knew nothing about cars when I started, and I learned the job to be the store manager, to be able to sell work and communicate with customers. Cause that's really what it comes down to is
Right.
even at that role, somebody walks in, they have an issue with their car. I have to be able to understand what the issue is, communicate to the technician, confirm that whatever the technician is going to recommend to fix their car is truly going to solve their problem, and explain if there's any other things that we found or things that should be aware of. And like, even that role, if you have the right person, like we can train them and they can learn. But obviously when it comes down to the person who actually fixes the car, yes, they need the experience and the education and the tools and like all the technical capabilities. But I mean, I can't fix cars, but I can interview a technician and I could tell you pretty good if he knows what he's talking about or not, just because, I've been around so many of them that I know like who's you and who knows what they're talking about.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Dude, $30 million in revenue is what your company's bringing in.
yeah, we'll do 36 is our like run rate.
Wow.
That's low. Like we should do, my goal next year, 45.
With
Again,
the same stores?
No, with some acquisitions. 40 with the same. Because our best stores do $2 million a piece. Our worst stores do 600,000, and so there's this huge variance, right? So if we can get every store to our best store, which we know is possible, I mean, that's 60, right? So like, it's a lot of the people, and like we put a new good manager in a store, literally same staff, same customers, we can get a 30% increase overnight. And
just
so
by one person, huh?
getting the right one person in there. But then what happens is you have this opposite effect where if you've got this like carousel of people's, like you give somebody in and you give them like a month or two and it's not working out, and you put somebody else in, then you start to like, you get instability, right? Of what, there's no consistency. The text, it's constantly changing from their perspective. The customers, it's a different face every time they come in, right? And so it's this balance of like, we know that it's a solid manager is what makes it or breaks it. And then how much time, we want to invest in the person to make sure that A, they are the right person, and B, they are trained. And so if we've done a good job identifying if they're the right person, then it's a question of, are they trained? And then if they're not trained because we haven't invested in time to train them, then that's on us. And like, then we should fix that, right? Like just dedicate, block off time, work with them, have them train in another store, whatever we got to do to get them up to speed. But then at that point, so now we've invested X amount of hours training them and they still can't do it. Now we get the wrong person. Right.
Yeah.
And then we got to go from there. But yeah, and that's not even, I mean, the best store in the country does about 5 million out of a single location.
Wow.
Same square footage, right? Then you have more people, right? Because one person can fix so many things, right?
Mhm.
But yeah, it's all about the consistency of the execution, and the guys who are the best performers are very consistent in their execution, and the ones that aren't are just half-assed, or
Yeah.
half the cars, they do half of the things they're supposed to, something like that.
It's funny. We were talking before we started recording about this semi-absentee thing, right? Like, are there franchises out there that can be run semi-absentee? Can is the key word. Yes, there are, but you nailed it in terms of like that 20% that drives 80% of any of these quote unquote semi-absentee franchises. And it's how good the manager is that you hire. Like that is
Yep.
like it's the manager, it's the marketing, and it's the location. Like a lot of these more like location dependent businesses, like those are the three things that drive the whole business model. And
Yep.
if you mess up one of those things, it ain't going to be very semi-absentee.
Yeah. And honestly, I think I don't know. I'm in the boat that says you pick one thing and you focus like majority of your attention on growing that one thing versus, I don't know. I see guys on Twitter and they talk about these like, the hold co, and I'm going to have like 7 different companies, and I'm going to be like, in the back of my mind, it says, well, I'm going to be below average at each one of those 7 companies. I'm going to have 7 different staffs, different business models, like different problems to solve, right? Like versus like in ours, I don't know. There's not many new problems that come up that
Right.
like we don't know how to solve. We've already proactively planned it. Like you have different payrolls and then all these different entities, and like there's all this overhead involved. I think by diluting someone's focus, that like you take all that energy, you put it all into one thing. Your life's like a lot simpler because you have less things to like, less variances, and I don't know, you can just grow a lot quicker, a lot faster versus trying to juggle all these different balls. I don't know. That's my take on it. And like, I don't know. That's people do it out of fear, like fear of putting all their eggs in one basket. Right. That's what drives it. And so I don't know. But if you get really good at something, you don't have that fear because like if it goes south, this is what we're gonna do. Right.
Yeah.
But
You know the game. Like
yeah,
the
the
game,
game, but like
the plays, you can kind of predict, maybe potentially some of the issues, but it also helps you identify things, I would imagine, the fixes a lot faster. And there's probably a finite amount of solutions to those fixes.
yeah, versus like if you've got like a whole bunch of below average stuff and like your margins are like maybe a little thinner, and like yeah, those fears might, come to fruition if, you're not performing like they should. And you're distracted because you're putting out fires over here and you're putting fires over here and putting fires over here.
Right. So I have a question, off the topic question, but I've been curious about this. You're deep into Brian's an amazing follow on Twitter. And I've been slowly I didn't even realize this whole like small business Twitter community existed. Do the people that actually talk about like getting into a business, do they actually do it, or are they just talking about it? Like, what do you know? Like, do these people actually do anything with what they talk about? Like, obviously you do, but
That's some of the guys. Yeah, I've connected with a number of the guys who do. I mean, the big guys, part of the goal on Twitter too is to, go beyond just, the tweets or whatever. And, I have calls with a lot of guys. I'm working on getting a bunch of them on my podcast too, just to learn about their business, and pretty amazing. I mean, what some of these other guys do too. But then, yeah, there's a whole bunch that like have no idea what they're talking about.
yeah.
Or just like it's cookie cutter vanilla advice.
So because you have a podcast separately, right? I was checking through it. You looks
Mhm.
like you've had some pretty interesting guests on that aren't franchise. They're not
Yep.
necessarily automotive. It's kind of all
Yep.
things entrepreneurship.
Yeah. So I started it last April. I'm almost to 100 episodes. I was doing 2 for a while. And my goal with that was just to, podcast is a great, excuse to sit down with somebody for 35 minutes to an hour and get to know them. Honestly, the relationships you establish with the guests are more important than almost anything else. And I'm sure you might have experienced, or you will experience that on your journey. And so it's like it's great for like building your network. It's built for like getting a wide varying opinions on things, right? Versus being kind of narrowed. And yeah, I mean, it's been fun. It's been a lot of fun. I got Mike McCallowitz booked, who's the author of Profit First. He's coming on.
Oh, yeah.
I've got another author, Steve Sims, Blue Fishing, which is one of my favorite books.
Cool, man.
coming on. I'm working on a couple other bigger names as well. And so a lot of that, like, what other excuse you're gonna have to talk to somebody, like Mike McAlowitz or whoever. So it's been fun. And I'm actually launching pretty soon. I don't know when this is going to come out, but I'm working on launching a separate second episode a week that will be dedicated to franchising.
Sweet,
every Friday. That'll be like more of a 10 to 15 minute, more solo me talking on something about, growing a franchise. How do you select? How do you run due diligence? How do you grow? How do you get owner financing? Whatever. There's all this stuff. So I'm going to have kind of two different flavors there.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome, man. It seems like you got a growing audience that
yeah.
Especially like, because we were talking, I think you threw out a tweet about franchise brokers, and I had a nice positive opinion on the other perspective of it. But I mean, like buying a franchise, especially for the first time entrepreneur, first time franchise owner, first time business owner, whatever, like it is a different ball game. And if you're not prepared, because it's kind of quirky, like it's not like it doesn't follow like traditional business acquisition process. Like you've got to gather all this information. It takes a long time to gather it, and then most importantly, you got to validate it all. Not that you can't believe what the franchise company is telling you, but you want to validate a lot of this stuff.
Yep. Oh yeah.
And there's a whole separate process for that, because you have a sales rep in your ear giving you, selling you the dream. You have this 300-page franchise disclosure document that is, if you haven't seen one before, it's hard to navigate through to pull out the kind of the high level information. And then you got to talk to franchise owners.
Yep.
That's the step. Most people don't do that. Isn't that crazy? Like most people skip talking to franchise owners.
I have
buy a franchise.
I have a whole like list of questions to ask franchisees, and like it's a whole topic there.
Oh yeah, because I mean, there's an art to having those conversations too, right? To be able to kind of like extract and validate the information. You can't just call somebody and say, "Hey, man, how much money are you making with Midas?" Yeah, they're gonna hang up on you. Like it's not gonna happen. So that's awesome, man.
Yeah, I'm working on some courses too to teach people about franchise, and that is one of the topics is how do you handle those calls? And you're completely right. It's an art. You have to like make the person want to help you. You have to make them like see themselves in you, right? Because that's how people want to help each other, is when they think it's like, it's a younger version of themselves, and that they're looking to add value, not just like take. And so there's a way you approach those phone calls, and in the questions you ask and the order that you ask them. And not just calling all the good ones, like call some of the ones who got terminated or are no longer with them, and get their perspective of why they left and what they, what could have been done, and, how is it different than what they thought it was going to be like. And I think that's the problem sometimes is, when you're going down the path, like you're so excited by everything and the opportunity, and that you want to make sure that you've covered all your bases and you heard the good and the bad. And even like we bought into 2 other separate franchises besides Midas. So I've made these calls, and I've looked into, we've went down paths of looking at other ones that we didn't pull the trigger on. And I mean, because some of the reasons of why the guys failed is also what might make you successful too. So it's not just you're going to hear bad stuff, but it's like you're going to hear a guy that says, "Hey, I was like never involved in the business, and it was like I treated it like a side hustle." Like the ones we've failed in, I've treated like a side hustle. So if someone's full-time dedicated, it's not going to be a side hustle. They say, "Great, well, I'm not, this isn't going to be a side hustle for me, right? I'm all in on this thing."
Yeah. So it's about, trying to get all the angles to understand if the business is the right fit for what you want to be doing with this next chapter in your life. And does it fit with what you have, with everything else you have going on, whether it's a corporate W-2 job, another business, or you're going to go all in. Like one of the things that I see a lot of people underestimate is the sales, like customer acquisition, like what it actually takes to acquire customers in a franchise. It's like one of these nerding out kind of in the weeds type things, but it's like, if you don't align with if you're not going to do what it takes to acquire a customer, whether that's over invest in advertising, hire a salesperson, or be the salesperson, if you don't have revenue coming in the door, revenue fixes a lot.
Nothing else matters. Yep. That's a good point. And it depends on like what the business is. Like in Midas, for example, we've opened new locations, and on day one, the phone's ringing, and like the next month, like we've been cash flow positive for that month. Right. But people know the brand, right? It's been around for 60 years or whatever. And so like for us, it's less pressure. But if you open up another one and it's like nobody knows the brand, or it's more of a B2B thing, and it's all outbound sales driven, like completely different business model that, you're gonna have to really work it. And like you said, if the person you hire isn't getting it done, like what are you gonna do about it? Are you gonna go and make those calls yourself? Are you gonna hire two guys and let them compete? Like, I don't know. There's these different angles to go at it, but yeah, I think you got to know what you're getting involved in. That's a great point.
What's your take on passion? Like I need, like there's people that come to me, they're like, Drew, I only want a business that I am super passionate about in terms of what the widget offers. And I'm like,
it's my personal, so it's a personal stance, right? That I don't care about cars. Like I'm not a car guy. I don't care about, I don't have to be passionate about it. I have to be passionate about running the business. So solving the challenges that the business, delivers. And so for me, like growing the business, solving the problems, like managing the team, like whether that is selling auto repair or like doggy daycare or like washing trucks or homes or whatever it is, to me, that the service itself doesn't matter as long as I believe in the business model. Like obviously I have to believe that this is a solid business model. It meets all the requirements that I'm looking for. And besides that, I don't care. But yeah, there's some people who say it's got to be fitness. It's got to be food. It's got to be pets. Like I want to do something I love. I think it's a personal preference. But for me, it's just find something that I think I could be successful in. And, hey, my cards are dealt, it's Midas and I'm being successful in this. If my dad or if we happen to be in another business, I'd be successful in that. So
it sounds like you have a passion for business.
Yeah. So I think if someone has a passion for business, I think you can open the catalog to almost anything that meets the business model that they want to look for. Like, and I think, so I have this whole like business model checklist is what I'm looking for more than what the actual thing we sell is. Like if it can meet my minimum requirements or as many, on the business model checklist, then, I think it's an awesome opportunity.
All right. So I got to ask, what's the checklist? What's on the checklist?
I'll pull it up. Hold on. But so it's like, it's you specifically, right? So that's part of it is what are you looking for? And like, I don't think there's any right or wrong answers. It's just a matter of, what's right for the person. Hold on. You could,
so I work with first-time business owners, the majority of what I do.
Yep.
I think a lot of people think they know what they want, but they really don't.
All right. You ready? So there's a bunch of things. So we could just blow through these, but number one, you're looking at startup capital. So how much money do you need to start up the business, whether it's, franchisees, working capital, whatever. Looking at ongoing capital requirements. So like, is it a business that requires a lot of ongoing capital? So you're in heavy equipment repair and replacement. Like if you're in a fast food place or, and they're requiring remodels every couple years, like car dealerships, they require every 10 years, they have to like invest hundreds of thousands to remodel it. Like, is that something you want to be in? Scalability, what's your target goal? So some people, they just want to side hustle and make 50 grand. Some people want to, replace their W-2 income. And then some people want to grow it to, 30, 50, 100 locations. And so I'm looking at like, does the franchisor allow multi-unit? Do they encourage it? Do they not? Like if you're Chick-fil-A, right? They don't, it's one, max 3, I think. And are there existing franchisees in your target size? So if you say, hey, I want to grow to 100 and the biggest guy's got 10, like I'd be looking at that to say, all right, well, maybe is there a reason why nobody has done this already? Is the business is not conducive to scale versus like in Midas, whatever, there's 2 groups that have over 100. So like, it's possible. And then there's competitors, even like you look at Monroe and Firestone and like they have 2,400 locations or whatever it is. It's not franchise, but like it's the same business model. Target customers, you doing B2B, B2C? What would you prefer? Is it sales or ops driven? So like a sales driven company would be like, door to door selling solar, right? And versus like operations driven would be like, you're the company that installs the solar panels once someone sells them. And, 2 different things though. If you're ops focused and you don't really have a sales team, like the sales dry up, what are you going to do? Versus if you're a sales team, but then you don't have the ops, like who's going to do the work? So like there's pros and cons there. This is a big one, which is what level of like skilled employees do you want to work with? Whether it's like unskilled employees. So you're like in the fast food, you got a whole bunch of minimum wage kids and like high turnover and like, but high training development, or is it more working with skilled? So you got like a higher paid, smaller applicant pool, higher margin on their work, right? This would be like, anybody in the trades. Competition, right? Looking how much competition's out there, if it's like a really niche business or if it's like a highly competitive business. Sales per employee. So like, you got to do $1 million in sales. How many employees does it take? Does it take 10 people, which is $100,000 an employee, or is it 5 people and you can get $200K an employee? I think that's a big one. We looked at Little Caesars years ago, and it was like a below average location doing like, I don't know, 700,000 in sales, needed like 20 part-time kids to run it. And to me, it was like, you need a lot of kids, a lot of turnover. And then like your sales per employee was like relatively low compared to, we can do $2 million with like 8 people, right? Versus they need 20 people to do 700, and just,
it's more efficient, right?
Yeah.
The higher revenue per employee.
Revenue patterns. Is it recurring on demand, project-based, seasonal, recession resistance? How often do you get paid? And looking at like 10-year outlook, like what does the business look like in 10 years? Can it be replaced by robots? Or is it like,
so let me ask you a question.
Stable?
Let me ask you a question on that. You know where I'm going to go on this one. So like with the automotive space, right? Like a lot of people, the head trash that people have is this whole EV, electric vehicle thing. What's your take on the EV stuff?
So it's a fan of Menace. I think it's way more popular in the media than it is in actual like real life. I think they have 2% of the market is EVs now, and every single brand's coming out with a new one. I mean, we watched the Eagles game, right? Literally every single ad break was for every single manufacturer pushing an EV. But first of all, EVs still have issues, right? Like they don't have engines, but they're still gonna have like battery issues, electrical issues, motor issues of various kinds. They still have tires. They burn through tires. Like you'll go through 3 set of tires before you change the brakes, right? So tires will be a new thing. There'll be a whole new line of just other types of repairs, guys, like fixing battery cells. Like I hear stories of, Tesla wants $15,000 to replace the battery, and then some guy will like replace the single cell that's bad for like $700, and it's probably all labor. And so like, I think there's just like whole new things that we're not even doing today that we'll be able to do. Those new cars have like uncountable amount of sensors. I don't know. It's like a load of sensors in it with LiDAR and radar and the backup cameras and the lane detection warning and all stuff that over time need to be calibrated and readjusted because they fail. And so there's this huge, like we've been pitched on investing in this equipment to be able to recalibrate all these equipment. So, we'll spend $50,000 or $60,000 or whatever it is to buy this equipment, but then you're, resetting these things at $300, $500 a pop. And, there's no cost on it, right? Because it's all labor in this computer. And so I think the business changes. At the end of the day, we're probably gonna be fixing the same number of cars, just at a higher margin. Because if it's all labor based, it's higher than if it's parts based. There's this other factor that nobody talks about, which is the infrastructure that would be needed to support a significant share of EVs is just not there.
Right. The recharging, is that like
not even the recharging, like the amount of power that the grid has. Like I've heard stats that we could probably get to about 5% of EVs of market share before the grid is like at capacity. Right. And so then to grow any higher, we need to generate more electricity. So then it's a question of, well, how do we generate more electricity to charge these cars? And most people like, they're called micro nuclear. So these small, nuclear reactors that can generate, not the big towers like that you'll see, but these smaller scale ones. And so I've heard stats that the US would need like 50 of these things to get up to whatever, like 20% share. And so then it's a question of, how the public feels about, especially now, like all the Russia shit, but a whole bunch of new nuclear related things being put in every city or every state in order to charge these cars. And then there's like, we're in the city and there's all these people that park on the street. Like, where are they gonna plug in their cars?
Right.
Like on the telephone pole, like, how before that thing is like hacked or stolen or broken.
Right.
I don't know. So I think I think we'll see it in wealthy areas, high income areas. There'll be large adaptation. People have garages, they'll have a solar panel on their garage to like charge the car. And it's like the self-sufficient model.
Yeah.
But I large scale adaptation that like truly affects our business. I don't really see it happening for anytime soon. Plus, like, the average car we work on is 10 years old. So anything, there's millions of cars being sold every single day. It'll take them 10 years before we even see them, really, for like our core of our business. We're working on cars that are 20 years old. So like, it's a long tail. In the oil change business, which is honestly at more, I think, at risk than ours, is booming. Like Take 5 and Valvoline and like Speedy and all these Grease Monkey are people are buying tons of locations, building from scratch. Don't believe the business is going anywhere. So I think what's going to happen is we'll see a mix of like hybrid stuff coming out where I think the cars will be a mix between EV and gas, where it'll be like, it's primarily driven on the motors, but then the gas can kick in, when it needs to, and they're highly efficient. You're getting 50 miles to the gallon. People don't feel like they'll ever be stranded with the EV concerns and the weather, this extreme hot and extreme colds, and that, just there'll be something in between. I think it'll be a mix is what we'll see.
I think it's a very interesting perspective, and there's a lot of wisdom in the the phantom menace and the hype that the media puts out there, and all the stuff we see versus the from the trenches perspective of somebody who's in the business, and living it every day in terms of what you're seeing down there. Fascinating. It's kind of interesting. Anyways, I'm not going to say that because it could go off on a big tangent, but so as you guys continue to scale, so what's the grand vision for what you guys are building?
I don't know. We're my brother and I talked about this morning. Like, what do we want to do? Where do we want to take it? We could take it anywhere we wanted. If we decide we want to start getting on plane rides, I mean, we could probably grow to 60 locations within 2 or 3 years. We could probably go to 100 if we wanted to, if we were really ambitious about it, but at a certain point you kind of balance, I don't know. Do you want to add these level of complications to your life, or can we just continue to kind of grow out from our circle in the markets we're already in, between acquisitions, converting competitors, geographically expanding slower. But then we look at the same store volume and it's like, if we can get each one of our stores to $2 million and do 60 out of 30, we'd make way more money than if we had 60 doing 75 million, right? Because of the overhead involved. And so, there's so much opportunity to improve the profitability of the same stores because we already have the infrastructure that, like, I don't know, in one way that becomes appealing, but in another sense, it's honest. It's easier to have more average volume stores than it is to have, lower, but, exceptional. Right. And so it's that question of what challenges do you want to solve? Like, do you want to solve just, hey, scale, we're going to grow a lot of these things. And as long as we're hitting this total dollar thing, we're okay, versus, hey, we're gonna have less, but they're gonna be extremely profitable. Is a whole nother angle.
And the lifestyle, like you said, like getting on planes, like what kind of lifestyle do you want to have as you guys lead
for me
thing?
and our employees and like our leadership team, really, who are the ones who have to travel between, and you get into different time changes and time zones, and is it all worth it, or can we achieve a similar goal without complicating our life as much? Yeah. So, and I enjoy teaching people. I enjoy getting on podcasts. I have my own podcast and working on the personal brand. Like, I have fun, helping, seeing other people succeed. And then there's opportunities that are arising, from that, I can act more as, advisor and strategy and coach, right. To help someone else grow their business, without, the operational responsibilities that I currently have. So, yeah,
I think, you definitely have a powerful story in terms of like what you guys have built is what people dream of, but you're doing it, you're figuring it out. And the fact that you have that, kind of in your heart to want to share it with other people and help other people. I think that's really cool, man.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks. I think it's, I think franchising provides an amazing opportunity that like a lot of people don't think about. Like, it's not on the list of things, talking about real estate and talking about software and all these things of how people make money. And, I don't know. I think franchising is like an awesome opportunity for people who are, operations focused. They're good at sales, and they're good at like working with people. I mean, I talk about it on Twitter, like it's speed to scale. Like, if you want to grow quickly, franchising can be that. Or if you don't, you want to stay at a certain size and you're good with that, like it can be like whatever you want it to be. I think it's just, you find a brand that you like with people that you enjoy working with, and you just focus on making that thing as big as you can.
Yeah. And which is a mindset thing, right? Like you said it earlier, like that was one of the things that changed for you guys, was kind of getting into a different mindset of scale. But that's easier said than done,
and then there's a community aspect. Like,
right.
I don't know if people realize, but like once you buy in and you're like a member of the country club, like you have access to like as many franchisees exist. So in Midas, there's about, I don't know, 800 of us or whatever it is. I don't know. Maybe it's less than that, but I could call up any one of them and like, we could talk about sales and profits and margins and payroll and best practices and all this stuff. Like versus like, if you're on the outside, no one wants to talk to you. If you have your own independent business and I called up like Joe's Auto Repair down the street and like wanted to ask how business was and like, what success is he having with marketing lately? Like, he's not going to talk to me. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Versus you're in a franchise system. I mean, some of my best friends now are just fellow franchisees, and like, we'll talk about each other about anything. I've hosted like live podcasts, live interviews with successful franchisees, and the audience was 70 other Midas franchisees. Like Midas didn't put that on. I put that on. Like, yeah. I put it on for the benefit of, well, myself, because I wanted to learn, but then to help everybody else like around me. And all that does is strengthens, my personal brand within the franchise brand. And so like, I don't know, if someone like runs the strategy and does the playbook, like to say, hey, I want to build my own personal brand. I want to strengthen the community within it. People are more willing to help you then, which allows you to grow faster, which is the speed to scale aspect of it. And I think it's just, once someone realizes the power within it, I don't really want an independent business like anymore. Like I would never, like, I think there's so many benefits that outweigh it. Like once you realize that, it's amazing.
Yeah. And you have to give in order to receive too, right? Like help other people in some form or fashion and just find an excuse, but or just asking for help, just say, humbling up a little bit and just saying, hey, you mind if I pick your brain about this?
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that have been through the stuff that you may be trying to figure out. And I think too, like there's a little bit of like the 4-minute mile, kind of like mindset, like,
big time.
Like other franchise owners, like they break through barriers that a lot of other franchise owners thought were unbreakable barriers, right? Like what you're doing and what the other groups have rolled up to 100, like, who knows what the ceiling is, right? Like, but it's a lot easier to learn from other people who are willing to share with you than trying to figure it all out on your own. And I would also imagine that, you are also a potential win-win opportunity for a franchise owner that's willing, like thinking about exiting too, right? Like they know who you are, they know what you guys are up to. And
really my intention of doing that. I mean,
yeah, it's smart, very smart.
And so you establish a relationship, you help, you figure out, hey, along the years, how can I help you? Whether it's employment things, because that's usually the biggest pain point is hiring people. So like best practice around that and just trying to help. And then when the day comes and you let them know, hey, we're looking to expand into X, Y, and Z. And if you ever think about selling, like, please give me a call. Yeah. Like, and it's like, I've gotten those calls. That's how we've grown and how we will continue to grow.
And we'll see if we can figure out a win-win deal, right? Like, it's, that's cool, man. Well, thank you for coming on, and congratulations on the success that you're having. If people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for people to find you?
So I'm everywhere. I'm on Twitter, as you mentioned, Brian Beers. You can find me there on LinkedIn. I'm there as well, and I have my podcast, which is called Business with Beers. Where I talk about to entrepreneurs, we talk about growing their business. We talk about, once you make money, where do you invest it? So I got a lot of friends in the real estate space and like alternative investing spaces that I think are pretty interesting. And like I said, I'm rolling out this franchise focused series that'll be every Friday as well. So anyway, lots of good content coming out there. And brianbeers.com, I have a newsletter too. I send out pretty frequently every week or so, talking about podcast things I've learned that week, talk about franchising, talk about just, everything in my world. So
that's awesome, man. That's fun. He's a good follow on Twitter. That's where I follow him. That's where I heard about him. So good stuff, Brian. Well, thanks, man. Cool. I appreciate it. Enjoyed it.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me.
That's a wrap. Hope you found a nugget or two in there that can help you on your franchise journey. And if you ever want to talk franchising, reach out to me anytime.